welcome. If Mr. Thomas you're watching, if you feel like correcting me anything here, please do so, because I do not want to say anything incorrect. And also to all you guys too, if you see something that seems a little off, perhaps again I just haven't paid attention. You know, I talk a lot with customers, and you know, they always ask me questions, and I kind of thought, you know, I'll put it all into this one video. Now the main thing about a titanium knife, you know, when I talk to people and they say, which one should I get, which one do they want, they think they always get perhaps the RC over the Ryu, and I can understand that because the Ryu has a very kind of wild, definitely tactical, how do you use this as an EDC knife kind of look. Definitely cool, but definitely not EDC use, perhaps. You know, and people are not familiar with recurves, and not familiar with tantos, and it's a shame, because both recurves, people can show that the testing of recurve blades work very well for cutting, and tantos also are very functional. I mean, you know, this is just as easy enough to get the pivot apple out. But the point is, you know, ultimately, why, for me then, I could understand why even I might want an RC, is that the fact that it is so bulky and big. An RC is much larger than this. The Ryu is a more thinned down knife. I would say it doesn't really feel that large. I mean, it is bigger than a lot of knives this size in terms of overall like height and all that stuff, but it just doesn't feel like it. And the reason is because of titanium. Mr. Thomas, I would say now, after talking more, is like known as Mr. Titanium. And he's a really fun guy because all of his knives, and he tests them, he steps on them, beats on them, likes to see what titanium is made of, and he really has a deep understanding of this material. And the key thing is, because titanium is light, means you can have a very large folder in your pocket and carry it comfortably and not weigh anything. So for me, you know, this idea, this concept of a titanium folding knife, you know, the larger the better, because that is kind of that's the purpose, in my opinion, of having a titanium knife. You can get a really large tactical folder and have it still weigh less than a traditional steel knife. Like this Emerson weighs more than this, you know, and look at the size of this Emerson in comparison. And a lot of people also who are concerned with blades that have fine tips and you know, thinner blades, you know, always the fear is of chipping. Well, titanium is more likely, for sure, if you watch my sheet grow testing video, to bend and break. And that is a nice feature too if you're worried about that. Next thing, of course, titanium knives are, you know, the titanium itself does not have a very high Rockwell, so it doesn't keep an edge very well. But Mr. Thomas remedies this by a pretty unique move, which is to add tungsten carbide. You see, and I would say he's the first person I've ever seen to do it, and he's still the person who keeps doing it. And there are a lot of knife makers, though, that do utilize this, but I say the credit goes to Mr. Thomas on this one. If people don't know, he's been doing knives, making knives now as a full-time job for over 2 decades, I think now. And the thing is, okay, tungsten carbide, yeah, basically to me when cutting, it feels like little grains of sand. Your edge always feels kind of like that, and you can feel the grains in a sense. So definitely, you know, one would say that it doesn't seem so easy to push cut. And another YouTube here, another fan of Mr. Thomas's work, Ormoto, was saying that Warren Thomas knives don't push cut, but they draw cut very good. And that's basically what you kind of is the right way to explain it, is that these knives are kind of like using a serrated blade. If you guys, you know, are familiar with that, then basically it always has a sort of saw-like edge, and always, almost like I always say to people, this is a very good knife in the kitchen. Very good. My favorite knife in the kitchen. Just blows flat grinds out of the water, because when you're cutting, you know, you have that, whatever you're cutting, you know, and you push down, there's no resistance met on the side. And of course, if what you're cutting is thin, the rest of it just peels off, and that's why that is a tactical blade shape, because of its ability to slice, cleave. And if you guys see your steak knives at home, sometimes you'll see steak knives. You know, here's your traditional steak knife. When I see this, and ever since I've seen this, this is what I think of every time I have a Warren Thomas knife in my hand. You know, we're not talking large saw teeth serrations. We're talking definitely like this style, where you can see there's just smaller serrations. Hard to get in focus. Okay? That is basically what this is at a more microscopic level. The beauty of this though, because it is soft and it can be sharpened to the point of being able to shave hair. You have to understand that the tungsten carbide, these little sand grains, are not consistent. They are spread out microscopically, and titanium kind of appears in between them. So it's not one consistent edge of tungsten carbide, nor is it consistent edge of titanium. It's kind of both. Go and you sharpen that titanium down, and you create a nice razor edge of that's formed of tungsten and carbide and titanium. But of course, since the titanium is soft, as you cut, that will quickly give way, at which point then you'll be only cutting with those saw teeth, those little grains, which are the tungsten carbide. So it definitely has a unique feel to using it. But if you guys can understand now, tungsten carbide is what you see on like industrial, like mining tools. It's used on as coating on like bits and things like that because of its high toughness and hardness. It's in the Rockwell A scale, like I say, just below diamonds and stuff. It's in the 70s to 80s, so it is very, very resilient material. And according to Mr. Thomas, even if there's spotting, you don't have to worry about rust issues. But the thing is, of course, unlike a traditional steel, which can round off, these tungsten carbides are much more resilient, and so you can keep sawing or draw cutting, and you will get the job done. Perhaps not a nice clean slice, because that titanium is not there to make it a nice clean edge, but you will do it. A lot of people, for example, think like, then what is a good outdoor knife? And most time for an outdoor knife, personally, I want lightweight. I want lightweight, zero maintenance, and a knife that won't ever lose its general toothy edge, which could be compared to perhaps the S30V and how people say it has that toothy edge that just keeps going. With this shallow chisel, basically this is almost a zero chisel. There's just a secondary bevel added for some extra edge stability, because Mr. Thomas, just like all knife makers, normal people are usually buying them for a general variety of uses. You have a very good slicing capability here. No resistance on this side, and whatever you're cutting peels off up this direction. People always say outdoor fixed blades are better because of and they always want carbon steel because it's tougher. Titanium will bend before breaking, and it's much tougher than traditional steels. It doesn't have weight, so you won't be able to chop. But for a more minimalist person, weight is not that necessary. Because it's actually a burden. Because you can baton. Now the recurved blade shape is because well, that's pretty self-explanatory. If you guys understand, for example, ethnic farming tools, when they cut, they have this claw kind of shape that catches the material, and I've shown this on other demonstrations and stuff. And a lot of, it's like a karambit. Many fighting styles, such as Kali or something, other knife makers, R.J. Martin, they use this shape. So some people may not know that Mr. Thomas has been around the tactical, folding knife community for over 20 years. A bulk of his following is special forces, like people who do need water, stain resistance, corrosion resistance, Navy SEALs, people who basically need to be able to swim with their knives, need their knives to be non-magnetic and be able to get through detectors, etc. All those concepts. It's meant usually for special situations, special force groups, and so he has a large following with a lot of Japanese military specialists and stuff. That's an interesting aspect. That's why they get some of the more cooler exclusives. Now, the main consideration for someone who's buying a Warren Thomas knife, they need to understand this, okay? What's nice about Mr. Thomas compared to other companies and other makers is that he doesn't make any claims. There are zero claims about what his knife is or is not, and what it can do. All claims made in this video are made by me. But you have to understand something. These are not hard use folders. A lot of knife makers, right off the bat, Terzula, Emerson, they didn't make folding knives. Folding knives were never fixed blades, like they say, and they're not meant for that. Most of the time, a folding knife is meant to be tactical folder. EDC, a tactical folder, meaning self-defense, light use, never intended for the full range of a fixed blade. And you have to understand then, the reason why is because Mr. Thomas is telling me this, that because this is all titanium, And we talked about, we talk about tolerances. People talk about machining tolerances and the tightness of everything. If you guys understand, titanium is a material that can flex, and so because of that, regardless of how tight, and for everyone who owns a Warren Thomas, they can tell you, just how strong and rigid it feels. I mean, it's more solid than most knives made out of traditional steel blades and steel stop pins, etc., and steel pivots. But it still has a very small amount of flex, no matter what you do, based on the fact that there's a G10, the titanium lock side, titanium pivot, there is a small amount of give. Especially with the Teflon washers instead of nylotron, which I kind of personally would like nylotron, but because of that, you have to look at it as a different category. It's kind of like, I know it sounds silly, but it's kind of like a sports car. If you have a heavy use folder, like a Strider SMF or something, that is a traditional, heavy built car. A Warren Thomas knife is more than along lines of like a Lotus or a Ferrari or a Corvette. You know how a Corvette has like a wooden floorboards or something. It's lightweight, but it's lightweight and has its own performance aspects that excel. And so it's still high performance, but it's in a different category altogether. So when you rate, the toughness of this Ferrari, it isn't going to be at the same, it will be pretty close, which is amazing. That's what I'm trying to say. This is pretty darn close, but it's not going to be able to be, compared to that SMF. This won't be able to be compared to SMF because they are in different categories. This is an all titanium knife. So you got to bear in mind then is this, with that flex, this lock bar will always be able to go further inward. There's always going to be a point where this can give, the stop pin's titanium, and it can give just a little bit for that microscopic movement for the lock bar to move in, and that can have a lot of wear on your lock bar, like extra damage to it that can, from just hard cutting downward, when this flexes and this kind of bends back a little bit, that can wear out that lock bar and kind of just, make it go in further than it's supposed to be, and then next thing you know, it's kind of jammed, you unjam it, and you're scraping off that titanium. So in that sense, I would say if you're looking for something that you can use hard use that still has all the aspects of this, go for a Warren Thomas fixed blade, which actually is my preferred when it comes to overall everything use for my uses, which range a little bit more from light to slightly heavy, but still makes a good light tactical folding knife if you want to carry one for self-defense, for example. And so that's what I'm saying. It's a good option to look perhaps at an EDC friendly, EDC sized fixed blade by Mr. Thomas, because it'll still weigh less than standard tactical folders and fixed blades. So it'll be very pocket friendly, neck friendly, but will outperform a blade of similar profile in terms of not chipping or breaking because it's titanium. And it will still outperform heavy use folders such as the SMF because it is a fixed blade. So take that in consideration. So for me, when I look at Warren Thomas folder, I want as large as it can be because it isn't going to weigh nothing. And I know that it's only for light use and self-defense, tactical use, and that's why I'm carrying it. I like the features of titanium. I like knowing that my knife isn't going to break on me. It's more likely going to bend. I know Mr. Thomas has a really cool warranty because he himself is one of those people that like to go and thrash on his own knives and take them to extreme limits. And if I do decide that I want something I can use hard, then I don't mind carrying a small EDC fixed blade by Mr. Thomas because those are very lightweight, very convenient to carry on person, and those will outperform any folding knife because all folding knives are mechanical. They're pieces of machinery. They have moving parts. A fixed blade, of course, is going to be more simple, more solid, and you can carry a small Warren Thomas fixed blade and barely notice it, and it'll do all the things in terms of cutting performance that I was just talking about. It'll basically be like carrying some people say on the forums, a folding portable chainsaw. It'll kind of have an edge performance like this as it goes dull. It's easy to, of course, sharpen the titanium and get it back to a razor edge. So it's kind of nice. It's basically like a serrated knife. They cut like serrated knives, but that can be sharpened in the traditional sense rather than having to deal with serrations. And they can be made into a clean edge. So it's very versatile.